Hey guys, Sean P here with Remax, and today we're doing our monthly market report for the month of May. In this video, what I do is I read the market report that's provided to us by the Victoria Real Estate Board, and I help you understand what it all means. These reports are created for realtors and they're created for the media. And so if you're a consumer and this isn't something that you do every day or report on periodically, it's stuff that might not make sense to you. And throughout my career, I've found that a lot of the people that I've worked with have either been confused or misinformed by the way that this is interpreted. So let's get into it. I'm going to start by reading about a paragraph at a time, and I'm going to break out from the written narrative that they provide us, and I'm going to explain what it means to you, the consumer, the owner of a home, someone who's searching to buy. I hope that this brings you value, and if you have questions or there's certain areas that you wish I would dig in more, please let me know. I would love to make this something that brings you personally more value. Okay, let's get started. They titled the report More Time and Choice in the Victoria Real Estate Market, May 2024. Okay. A total of 763 properties sold in the Victoria Real Estate Board region this May. That's 1.5% fewer than the 775 sold in May 2023 and 12.5% increase from April 2024. So we're flat or down in terms of sales when compared with the same month last year. Anything that is less than a few percentage points, I essentially consider flat. In the price point that we're dealing with and the volume that we're dealing with, we're only talking about 760 something properties. 1.5% of movement is really not enough to be noteworthy or to think that it's indicative of a bigger trend. That's only a few properties. Okay. Now, 12.5% increase from April 2024. That might sound really exciting, and yet at the same time, it's pretty typical that we see a higher sales volume in terms of units in May than in April. So I'm also not going to read too much into that. It is nice that sales are taking place. It's nice to see market activity, but we're basically keeping with the same trend that we saw last year. Okay. Sales of single family homes exactly match the number from May 2023 with 399 sold. Sales of condos were down 5.2% from May 2023 with 235 homes sold. So that's interesting. We're essentially looking at a pretty flat market, but this month it seems as though a greater proportion of that came from single family homes as opposed to the condominium market. Through a lot of Canada, it hasn't been the most attractive year for condos. It's been pretty slow in terms of pipe growth. Victoria hasn't been as bad as some of the bigger metropolitan areas. Like Vancouver and Toronto condo markets are hurting a lot more just because they built so much inventory in the past few decades. And with changes in interest rates, a lot of investors who own those condos are no longer able to make them float through Airbnb or traditional rentals. Combine that with the new regulations that are coming into a lot of cities with Airbnb, and it just makes sense that the condo market's a little bit slower. There's more inventory. There's less reason for people to buy it because they're difficult to make the numbers work on for an investor. And so we're seeing more of the market transact on the single family side. Again, we're talking about a difference of 5.2% in an otherwise active market. So condos were down 5.2%, but we still sold the same total number of homes. So I think, realistically, that means that single family homes made up that 5% and then some to rebalance us. We're seeing the single family market perform well comparatively. Back to the report. Spring is generally prime time for real estate in Victoria. Said our real estate board chair. And May is typically when we are at or near the peak of activity in our property market. This May was another stable month for both buyers and sellers. With more inventory on the market, consumers had more choice and could take time to make decisions and complete their due diligence. The additional listings also meant less pressure on pricing, so prices remained relatively flat. Now, I'm just going to say again, people always think that a flat market might not be a good market. Typically, sellers want a seller's market. And yet the reality is we've been in that market for the past decade. And Sellers want more regardless what the number is on their house. And who can blame them? I do every time that I sell one of my properties. And yet the reality is that the challenge of a very heated seller's market is its unpredictability. So you'll have an amazing price for a home compared with what it would have sold a year ago, a few years ago, or even 6 months ago. And yet we always want to strive to get as much as we can. But the problem is, in a seller's market, a lot of the growth is driven through bidding wars, which are very difficult to predict because it comes down to the emotional candor of the buyer that happens to be offering the top bid. Okay. So with that, we're in this balanced market, and this is a good market to sell your home in. Guess what? It's not fireworks, but you have predictability. You can get out and shop for a home, assuming that likely the price of your home won't move too much during the time that you're shopping. So there's a lot of benefits to the seller. It's not just the buyer who has that added ability to kind of shop and take their time and look and go through a more traditional offer process where there's conditions. It's not just the buyer that's benefiting from all this. Okay. There were 3,338 active listings for sale on the Victoria Real Estate Board at the end of May 2024. Now, that is an increase of 10.6% compared to the previous month of April, and a 52.5% increase from the 2,189 active listings for sale at the end of May 2023. Okay, so we have a lot more listings actively on our market. And so a lot of people who were considering their homes might look at this information and say, well, this is bad. It's more competition. And yes, it is more competition, but we are nowhere near the point yet that this would even be considered in a global sense, what we would call a balanced market. That we're nowhere near that. Right now, we are still in a market where we're seeing listings sell relatively quickly. There aren't very many months of inventory resting on the market. So we're getting towards more balance, but this is still a very healthy market to sell a home in, okay? 52.5%. There's another thing that we need to bear in mind here, and that's that last year, our market had a bit of a slowdown, right? So we saw prices decrease over the past few years a little bit, not very much, maybe about 5%. And during that time, we would assume that it was because there was a lot of inventory in the market. So there was more competition and sellers were forced to take lower prices. But it actually wasn't necessarily that, because in our market in particular, there's very few distressed sales. There aren't a lot of people that are forced to sell their home and will take whatever they can get financially, pushing the market down. What we did have was buyer reluctance. And this was all due to interest rates. Buyers were reluctant to pay a normal price, or the price previous to interest rate changes. They were reluctant to pay that because the carrying costs were higher. So sellers were accepting more money, but it wasn't through distress. They were selling because they chose to sell because of life changes or whatever else they had going on. And so a lot of sellers that would have put their homes on the market in the past 2 years just deferred their listing. They said, I'm not going to sell right now. And that's why we saw so few listings over the past few years. And this isn't just Victoria. I coach real estate agents all across Canada. And this was the case. They were talking to people, and people would say, look, I don't need to move. Why would I sell my home right now? It doesn't make sense for me, especially if you think about markets where people were downsizing, or they were leaving a big city where that was their nest egg. It didn't make sense for them to sell. So they just sat on their home. So we had lower inventory. We had lower prices, but again, it wasn't from distress. So now what we're seeing is we're just seeing the natural inventory come back to where it should be, maybe even a little bit of extra inventory to account for the fact that there were some people who were waiting. So is it a bad thing for sellers? Well, you're going to want to stand out like you do in any market, but I don't think it's a bad thing, because again, we're seeing really balanced conditions. Properties are still selling quickly. Buyers are still in a position where they know they shouldn't wait too long before making an offer, because there's other people out there looking. I can tell you, feet to the ground, when we're showing properties, a lot of them are getting offers in the first 1 or 2 weeks. And we've seen a lot of properties over the past couple months that are even getting more than one offer on them. And so there's been that competitive bidding. Back to commentary from the chair. After so many years of consumers navigating an unbalanced market, it's positive for buyers and sellers to see some months of consistent balance. A lot of folks who have been watching the market over recent years may find that now is a good time to sell, and buy as market conditions have changed for the better. Of course, as always, talk to your realtor. Okay, so again, we're just really trying to make sure that people understand that this is a healthy market to buy in. It's not a bad market to sell in. And if you're doing both transactions, this is a great market. Personally, I sold my home in Toronto before moving out here, and we were in a peak market. It was COVID. It was a great time to sell. And yet I was apprehensive about selling and buying because I knew that there was a tremendous amount of volatility in the market. There has been for the past decade. And in that moment when I was listing, I was really concerned. And so what I did was to minimize the risk associated with buying and selling, because I didn't want to buy high and then sell for less than I expected and end up, trying to scrounge for money. What I did was I just condensed the period of time with which I sold and bought in. I purchased and sold those two properties within a week of one another, which means that I did it in the same market. So over the past few years, it's been really common for us as realtors to coach people that they should be trying to condense their separation of their two trades to as short a time as possible to mitigate the risk of the market shifting in between their transactions. Right now, as things are in this moment, we don't need to stress out so much about that. You can be a little bit more leisurely in the pace of your transactions, which is really attractive to people who are doing both sides, a list and a sale. Okay, the meat and potatoes I saved for last. The multiple listing service home price index benchmark. My God, what a mouthful. So average price, guys, is what we're talking about here. Okay, the average price value for a single family home in the Victoria Core in May 2023 was $1.3,900,000. So 1,300,900. The benchmark value for the same home in May 2024 increased by 0.7% to 1.309700. So 11309. Okay. So basically a year ago it was 1.3, pretty much even. And now we're a hair shy of 1.31. It's flat. Okay. Nothing's really changed in terms of pricing. And this is encouraging. Guys, remember, we saw a 50% boost in listings. So when I was saying that this is a market where buyers, it's not like they're running to the bank and stealing these properties. They're paying the same price. They just have more selection. Sellers, your property will still sell for the same value that it would have over just about any point in the past year. It just might take a little bit longer, and you're going to need to make sure that you stand out. We can help you with this through staging and creative little updates that you can do. Little things can make a huge difference. So have us come in and talk you through what you can do to make sure you stand out should you choose to list. Okay, the benchmark value for a condo in the Victoria Core May 2023, so a year ago, was $562,900. And the same condo May 2024 increased by 1.2% to $569,500. And from April, it again came up like $1,000. So this is flat. Prices are flat. We have more inventory. It's such an amazing time to shop. Sellers are finally putting properties on the market so you can get out and be selective. If you're a seller, you're still going to get the same price. You just might need to wait a couple weeks for it as opposed to expecting it to happen overnight. And frankly, it's a much more predictable market than we've seen the past few years, frankly, maybe decades. Okay, one last thing. This report was released on the 3rd, I think. And we are now the 6th. They announced yesterday on the 5th that we are seeing a rate drop. Not a huge one. Okay, so the Bank of Canada reduced rates by 25 basis points and basically brought it down a quarter of a point. This is a small change, but it is a huge change for our confidence level. We haven't not seen a rate change in a very long time that was positive. So this is a really, really exciting moment for our entire market on a whole, because we have been sustained under really painful rates comparative to what we've seen over the past few decades. And these rates, although not crazy, they're really not that high historically, but they're very high considering the prices that many owners purchased their homes for over the past decade or two. So seeing a positive trend in rates is good. It's going to create a little bit of breathing room for people who are struggling with payments. It's also going to encourage a lot of buyers who have been waiting on the sidelines to seize this moment as their opportunity to get out and start shopping. So We would probably expect that in the coming month, we're going to see a little bit of a flurry of activity over the next 2 or 3 months with this news bringing new buyers to the market. So we're excited to see what that looks like, but it's not reflected in this report. Frankly, even if it was even if it was announced a week before this came out, it wouldn't have really had time to put much impact on the statistics. It would have just been something that the board chairs had mentioned in their narrative. So looking forward to seeing what that looks like. I think we've got a couple really exciting months ahead. If you're thinking about prepping your home for sale, I would say take advantage of the fact that there's this new confidence in the consumers in your market and have us in sooner than later. As always, thanks for watching, and we're looking forward to seeing you next month.